The royal family has always been a picture of tradition, ceremony, and unshakable hierarchy. But what happens when one of the most iconic institutions in the world faces a challenge from within, a challenge that cuts to the very heart of succession, power, and family loyalty? Imagine, for a moment, a letter sitting on King Charles's desk, one that no one outside the palace could have anticipated. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It's not just another public inquiry or routine request. This one is personal. This one strikes at the future of the monarchy itself. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, had made a request regarding her daughter, Lilibet. And according to insiders, the king's response was not just firm, it was explosive. But what was the request? And why would it provoke such a reaction from a monarch known for measured diplomacy and restraint? These are the questions that have gripped royal watchers, journalists, and curious onlookers alike. And the answers, when they come, are as shocking as they are consequential. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly. Meghan's letter wasn't leaked to the press, it wasn't announced in a press release, and it wasn't discussed in public forums. It was private, confidential, sent through the appropriate channels with all the politeness and protocol expected of a royal petition. Yet, beneath the formalities lay a tension so thick that palace aides reportedly found themselves holding their breath. Why? Because this was not a trivial request. This was a challenge to centuries of tradition. The succession of the British throne, the line of inheritance, and the position of a young child were at stake, and every word in that letter had implications that could reverberate far beyond the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace. From the moment the envelope arrived, the palace was thrown into a whirlwind of speculation and strategy. Senior aides whispered behind closed doors, advisors convened urgent meetings, and security protocols were tightened. Not because of a threat in the conventional sense, but because of the political and emotional gravity of what was unfolding. King Charles, a man shaped by decades of preparation for the crown, found himself confronting a scenario he had never faced before, a direct request from his son and daughter-in-law that could redefine his family, his monarchy, and, ultimately, his legacy. The content of Meghan's request, though not fully public, was clear enough to raise alarms. It was about succession, about recognition, about the place of Lilibet in the royal hierarchy. It was about influence and security, about setting precedents that had never existed in the royal family's history. And yet, beyond the legal and ceremonial implications, there was the deeply human element, a mother advocating for her child, a father evaluating not just the law but the morality, the optics, and the long-term consequences of his response. The tension was palpable. Consider this. In an institution that prides itself on stoicism, discretion, and protocol, a single request could ignite a firestorm. The monarchy is a delicate balance of tradition, public image, and family dynamics. Every decision is scrutinized. Every word is dissected. And when the stakes involve a young child who symbolizes both the future and the continuity of the royal line, the pressure becomes almost unbearable. Imagine being King Charles, sitting in your private study, reading the carefully penned words of your daughter-in-law, weighing history against emotion, law against love, and public perception against private loyalty. What would you do? Royal historians have long noted that moments like these are inflection points in monarchy, rare, dramatic, and defining. The last time a direct challenge of this magnitude occurred, it involved decades of precedent, political maneuvering, and personal sacrifice. This time, the stakes were different. This time, the challenge was immediate, personal, and explosive. The palace corridors, usually humming with quiet efficiency, were suddenly alive with whispers, speculation, and cautious concern. Who would support the king? Who would sympathize with the Sussexes? And more importantly, how would the public respond once the news inevitably leaked? Public reaction was already on the radar. Social media, tabloids, and international news outlets thrive on royal controversy. Even before a statement was made, the mere suggestion of conflict involving Charles, Harry, Meghan, and Lilibet created a maelstrom of speculation. Headlines speculated, pundits debated, and opinion pieces flourished. The world was watching, and every detail mattered. Every delay, every nuance in tone, Every facial expression captured in photos became a piece of the unfolding drama. The emotional complexity cannot be understated. On one hand, King Charles faced a constitutional and ceremonial challenge: succession, titles, and protocol. On the other, he faced a profoundly personal one: the relationship with his son, Harry, whom he has loved, worried for, and attempted to guide through public and private challenges. And then there's Meghan, whose advocacy for her child intersected with global media attention, public scrutiny, and historical precedents. This is not a story of mere disagreement. This is a story of confrontation between family, duty, and legacy. But what happened next escalated the situation beyond even the most speculative observers' expectations. According to palace insiders, King Charles did not simply deny the request. He did not offer a compromise. He reportedly issued a response that was firm, unequivocal, and, some would say, angry. In that moment, the stakes of the royal family shifted. The king had drawn a line that reportedly included a prohibition on direct contact with Harry and Meghan. Such a move, unprecedented in modern royal history, sent shockwaves not just through the palace, but across the world. The implications are enormous. Family relationships strained, public perception altered, and the legacy of the monarchy itself challenged. Questions abound. How will Harry react? How will Meghan respond? And most critically, what does this mean for Lilibet, a child born into extraordinary circumstances and now at the center of an extraordinary dispute? Royal watchers are left speculating, journalists are left theorizing, and the public is left holding its breath. Every rumor, every insider account, and every tiny detail becomes magnified. Every statement, whether public or private, is now part of the narrative. And yet, despite all the speculation, one thing is certain. This is not a story that will resolve quietly or quickly. The dynamics of the royal family, the weight of history, and the pressure of global attention ensure that every decision reverberates for months, even years, to come. For King Charles, the challenge is not just about enforcing rules. It is about maintaining authority, dignity, and control in a situation fraught with emotion and risk. For Harry and Meghan, the challenge is about advocacy, protection, and navigating a world that scrutinizes every choice they make. As the world watches, the palace braces for fallout. Security is heightened, advisors are consulted, and communications are closely monitored. Every move is deliberate, every word calculated. This is high-stakes family drama played out on the global stage. And the question that haunts everyone involved, and the public alike, is deceptively simple. Will the king's line in the sand hold, or will it crumble under pressure? It all began with a single document, an envelope that arrived in the quiet of Buckingham Palace, disrupting the usual rhythm of the morning. But this wasn't an ordinary piece of correspondence, nor was it a formality designed to maintain appearances. This letter, penned by Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, carried weight far beyond the ink on its pages. Inside lay a request so audacious, so unprecedented, that it would send ripples through the corridors of the palace, through the press, and across the globe. At its core, it was about Lilibet, the youngest member of the royal family, barely 2 years old, already at the center of a maelstrom she would not even remember. The hook was immediate. Meghan's request wasn't just a casual inquiry. It directly challenged centuries of royal protocol, raising questions about succession, titles, and privileges in ways that had rarely, if ever, been confronted in modern times. The letter itself, carefully composed with measured words yet unmistakable intent, was addressed formally to King Charles. It asked him to reconsider Lilibet's place in the line of succession. To many, it would have sounded innocuous, even reasonable. But within the palace, where tradition is law, even a single deviation from protocol is a seismic event. For King Charles, the letter landed like a thunderclap. In a career that had spanned decades of public service, preparation, and careful diplomacy, he had faced countless challenges. Controversies, political debates, public scrutiny, they were part of life in the monarchy. But this request was different. It wasn't about politics, appearances, or even policy. It was about family, about legacy, about the very heart of the monarchy. The king reportedly read the letter in his private study, alone, the air thick with the weight of responsibility. Every sentence was parsed, every implication considered, and as he read, reports suggest, his jaw tightened, his gaze sharpened, and the familiar calm of the palace began to crack. To understand the gravity, consider the stakes. The British monarchy is one of the most scrutinized institutions in the world, with rules and traditions meticulously observed for centuries. Succession is not just a formality, it is a covenant, binding not only the family but the country and, in a symbolic sense, the Commonwealth. Altering or even questioning that line is akin to shaking the foundation of a centuries-old edifice. It is not something done lightly, and it is certainly not something met with casual acquiescence. Yet Meghan's request was both personal and strategic. It reflected a modern tension within an ancient institution, a tension between the desires of individual family members and the rigid structures of monarchy. At its heart, the letter was about Lilibet, but it also carried echoes of larger concerns: the Sussexes' relationship with the royal family, their public image, and their place in the historical narrative of the monarchy. It was a request that could not simply be filed away, ignored, or politely deferred. Action, or reaction, was inevitable. Within the palace, the letter set off immediate whispers. Senior aides and advisors convened in emergency meetings. Courtiers familiar with decades of royal protocol debated the legal, ceremonial, and public relations ramifications. Security protocols were quietly reviewed, not out of fear of violence, but to ensure the smooth management of potential fallout. The corridors that typically hummed with quiet, orderly routine now carried a palpable tension. Even minor staff reportedly noticed a change in the atmosphere. The careful, measured steps of aides, the furtive glances, the sense that a storm was about to break. Insiders described the king's reaction as swift, firm, and decisive. Reports suggest that he considered every angle: historical precedent, constitutional implications, and, crucially, the personal dynamics at play. He reportedly consulted private advisors and senior family members, weighing not only the legality of the request, but also its emotional and public impact. Every decision carried weight. Every word could be interpreted, leaked, and debated worldwide. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the letter represented hope and advocacy. Meghan, a mother fiercely protective of her child, framed the request in terms of Lilibet's future, security, and well-being. To her, the request was not confrontational. It was protective. And yet, in the rigid world of royal tradition, even the most carefully phrased request can appear audacious, provocative, or disruptive. The contrast between intent and perception could not have been more stark. The timing of the request only heightened the drama. Buckingham Palace was already navigating the aftershocks of previous Sussex controversies: media scrutiny, public criticism, and the ongoing narrative of a family divided. The addition of a direct request regarding succession, a topic of universal attention, legal complexity, and emotional resonance, was combustible. Observers noted that the palace rarely deals with anything so directly challenging the king's authority. In essence, Meghan had entered a terrain few outsiders could imagine. She had brought the line of succession into question, and with it, the very authority of the monarch. Royal historians quickly contextualized the situation. Comparisons were drawn to previous disputes over inheritance, titles, and succession, though few, if any, in recent memory involved such a direct confrontation between a reigning monarch and his own son and daughter-in-law. The uniqueness of the moment was not lost on the public or the press. Headlines speculated endlessly. Has Meghan crossed a line? Will Charles stand firm? Is Lilibet's future secure? Each article, tweet, and broadcast magnified the tension, adding external pressure to an already volatile family situation. The suspense built as King Charles considered his response. According to sources, his deliberation was intense, private, and absolute. The palace, which often operates with discreet diplomacy, found itself holding its collective breath. Advisors report that the king's decision-making process was methodical yet emotionally charged. Every scenario was considered: compromise, concession, outright refusal. But the underlying question remained: how could he balance the weight of tradition, the demands of family, and the scrutiny of the world? As the world waited, Harry and Meghan were reportedly preparing for every possible outcome. They anticipated resistance, public backlash, and scrutiny, yet the possibility of an outright rejection, or worse, a prohibition on contact, was a scenario they could not ignore. It was the kind of tension that had haunted the palace for decades, a family torn between love, duty, and power. And in this instance, the center of the storm was not just a policy or a precedent, but a child whose very existence symbolized both continuity and change. The culmination of these tensions led to a moment that insiders say will be remembered in royal history. King Charles, after days of private consideration, issued a response to Meghan's request. It was firm. It was unequivocal. And according to those close to the palace, it carried consequences that extended far beyond the legal question of succession. It reportedly included a prohibition on direct contact with Harry and Meghan, an unprecedented step that stunned both family and advisors.